Mr. Cialdini, first of all, thank you very much for making some time to talk to us.
Well, I'm glad to be with
Really
you and
appreciate
your audience.
Okay, thank you. What is the difference between the art of persuasion and the science of persuasion? What is the difference?
You know, I think we have always thought about persuasion as an art, something that people are born with, people who know just what to say, just when to say it. They were born with this gift, and I think that's true. There are people born like that. But fortunately, for the rest of us, it's also something that's not just an art, but a science. There are clear principles that can be taught and can be learned. I think that's the difference. An art, only artists can master. But a science, because it provides logical, clear steps to take to achieve a goal, we can all improve our influence by understanding what the science has told us.
Your work is unique in the sense that you are one of the first to actually see this difference and start working on it. When did you come to the realization that it's not just an art of persuasion, there is a science as such? When did you start realizing this?
You know, I think I started realizing it when I recognized that I was saying yes to people for reasons that I didn't quite understand. I didn't know why I was giving to these charities that I had never heard of, that why I was buying products I didn't really want. People would come to my door and sell me things. And I recognized, well, wait a minute. There must be a science to this. There must be a system that they're using that could get me to say yes to things I didn't really want. I wonder what that science tells us. And so I began to study the factors that increase the likelihood that people will say yes in a scientific way.
To see how influencing in day-to-day practice works, you actually went undercover, so to speak.
I did.
You worked at a car dealership, at a real estate brokerage, in a restaurant and so on. What are some of the most important things you learned at the time when it comes to persuading people?
There was one thing that surprised me, because when I looked at those settings, at the people who were arranging for others to say yes to them more frequently, I didn't just look at the average individual. I looked at the best persuaders within each of those professions. And what I expected was that those people who were at the top of their industry would spend more time structuring what it was that they were offering to people, the logic of it, the clarity of their case, the features, the most positive aspects of what, and they would spend a lot of time arranging their case, arranging what they would present to people. That's not what I found. The aces of the profession, the top performers, spent more time on what they did and said immediately before they made their request. So, for example, you just described the authority principle. Before they ever presented their position, they would establish their authority. And that changed the way people thought about the very same features of what they were presenting. So it was always what they did first. They were kind of like gardeners. They recognized it doesn't matter how good this seed is that you have to plant. If you haven't cultivated the ground first, if you haven't prepared the earth, it will not flourish. It will not bear fullest fruit. So they spent their time as agriculturalists preparing the ground for their case, for their product or service.
One of the small examples I found very illustrating is that when I go to buy a new car every so many years, and I bring my old car in to see how much it is worth for them to appraise it, I always thought they actually looked at the car to see what it was worth. And you give an example with, what is it? Looking for golf balls, I think it is. What is it exactly about that the golf balls have to do with trading in a car?
Yes, car salesmen are trained not just to look at the trade-in, but to look for evidence of what the hobbies and the interests are of the customer. Are there golf balls on the back seat? Is there camping equipment in the trunk? Is there a ski rack on the roof? Are there child seats in the back? Whatever. And then the car salesperson is trained to say to the customer, oh, really? You like to ski? I'm a skier. Or you have children? So do my wife and I, that age. And so all of a sudden there's a connection. There's a bond. This leads to liking, which is another one of the principles of influence. We prefer to say yes to those people who we like. And one thing that causes us to like others is similarity. So where there are similarities, if they're brought to the surface, people resonate to them, they feel more rapport and more comfortable with the exchange.
There are other principles. You work with a great number of companies these days, whom you advise. One of them is, in Dutch we say Bose, the audio systems. Bose. I actually bought, just before I read your book, one of those small systems which Bose calls the Wave Music System. It's a small but fairly expensive piece of equipment. And then later I learned from reading your book that Bose actually used some smart techniques to sell that thing to me. I was a bit taken aback.
Yes.
But because you increased their sales by just using small techniques.
Exactly. There is research in behavioral science, in fact, that won the Nobel Prize for a man named Daniel Kahneman a few years ago, that shows that people are more motivated to act by the idea of losing something than of gaining that very same thing. The first advertising campaign that Bose used for its Bose Wave Music System was a complete disaster for them. They did not sell anything like the number of units they expected because it was a great piece of equipment. No competitor had anything like it on the market. And the ad said new features, new simplicity, new performance, new elegance, and so on. Just people were uncertain. If it's new, I don't know if I should move in that direction. So they sat on the fence. We asked them to change the word at the top from new to hear what you have been missing. Now, with that lead in, the new features and performance and elegance and so on, those were things people were going to miss. They were going to lose if they failed to move in that direction. That created a 45% increase in sales for the same unit, the same piece of equipment, but engaging the idea of losing something was simply more mobilizing of action than the idea that they would gain it if they chose it. The idea that they would lose it, more powerful. So people are entitled to honestly tell their audience what will be lost if what is being recommended is not chosen.
There are other principles still.
Yes.
The campaign of Barack Obama, you've used an example of other principles being used well. Because Barack Obama was an unknown guy, a black person, he had a funny name, difficult to elect. And you said that campaign used some of these principles very well. What are some of the things Barack Obama and his team did that you said that's
well,
smart?
I think that was really smart was because there was some uncertainty. One of the things that people use to decide how to reduce uncertainty in themselves about a candidate or a product, anything, is they look around them. What are a lot of other people like me doing in this situation? And what the Barack Obama campaign featured in all of their ads was a sea of faces behind him and in front of him. And the cameras were always panning not just the man, but the audience. The evidence was, look at all these people who have decided that this is a good candidate. That must mean I should pay attention to this candidate too. Everybody, and the other thing that they did was to be sure that in the crowd there was every demographic category represented that the camera would see. There were young people, there were old people, there were wealthy people, there were poorly dressed people, there were ethnic people, everybody was represented. So you could always see somebody just like you in a big crowd who had decided to support this man's candidacy. That was very powerful for him.
You talk a lot about the morality and the proper way of doing, ethical way of doing things in terms of persuading and so on.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me that the line between just convincing or persuading somebody and manipulating him or her, that can be a small line. Where does that line get crossed?
This is an excellent question, and it's one that I've thought a lot about because when I speak to groups, I don't want them simply to use these principles to exploit others. I would like them to use those principles to benefit others, to inform others into assent. And the way to do that is to switch from manipulation where you deceive or coerce or push others to say yes. They resent that, and they don't come back to want to do business with you in the future. Right? Instead, what I recommend is that we look in the situation for one or another of these principles that truly exists there. Do I genuinely have expertise on this matter? I'm entitled to bring it to the consciousness of my audience. Is there genuine consensus? A lot of people deciding that this is a good choice? I'm entitled to show that. Do I have genuine scarcity in my situation where if people choose some other way, they lose the unique features that are associated with my product and service? All of those things, is there genuine similarity? All of those things are possible to find and simply raise to the surface. So I call this a detective's approach to persuasion and influence. You find and uncover those things that help resolve the issue and solve the problem.
Finally, why do you think it is, I'm sure you have a reason for this, that the 6 principles you've mapped out work so well? Why is it that, because I've read a lot of the stuff and I look at the situation and think, yep, there's always one of these principles involved and it actually does work. Why are we people so sensitive to them?
This is a great question, and it's the thesis of my book, Influence. It is that these are the 6 principles that work for communicators to get others to move, because these are the 6 things that typically steer people correctly as to when to make a good choice. It is wise to follow the lead of genuine authorities. It is wise to follow the lead of many similar others. It is wise to seize unique and scarce opportunities for benefit. All of those things typically counsel people correctly. So if they're the ones that communicators use to be successful, it's because they normally are effective for those who employ them, who then follow them.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.